when Martin King went to jail for the first time, and I had just met him in Coretta, um, but I did what seemed like the proper thing to do, and that was to call an acquaintance who had something terrible happen in our family and commiserate, which is what I did. And Coretta, in her whole life, never had more than 3 conversations with me on the phone, and each one lasted over an hour. I mean, we would go on all sorts of subjects. So at that point, she began telling me about the problems that they had. Marty was still too young for her to worry about, but Yoki had heard the news on the car radio coming home from school that her father was in jail. And, and Coretta knew that she had a job on her hands to, make her child feel okay about this. So um, I'm big sister. I always felt like big sister. We were older. We had children that had already been through all this mess, and we didn't know that his life had been threatened, but we knew that ours had been. So, I came on like a big sister. I felt that way. So I went on uh, the lecture, I suppose, to Coretta about couldn't you explain to her about, I mean, she's heard you talk about how much you felt, how strongly you felt about India after this trip that you just got back on from, and how much you and your father admired, and your husband rather, admired Mahatma Gandhi. And so I go on and on, and she's polite enough to let me. And when I finally stopped to take a breath, Coretta stopped and said, "Janice, this child's only 5 years old. She doesn't even know she's colored yet."
Got it. Wow. Tell the story about how Martin Luther King got lost coming to your house for dinner.
Oh, well, he was he was late. He and Coretta were late, very late. But we had learned to expect that from some of our friends, so we weren't upset about it or anything. But he insisted on not just apologizing once, which I told him was perfectly okay, but he had a story to tell along with this apology. It wasn't uh, just cut and dried. Well, the story was that they were unfamiliar with this part of town, which really tickles me when I say that today because his son lives just down the street. But um, in those days, if you were a person of color and were seen in Buckhead after dark, you better be coming to serve a party. So he said, I didn't want them to, we had to drive up to one of the houses to ask which one was yours, but don't worry, I wouldn't embarrass you with your neighbors. I let Coretta go to the door so they wouldn't recognize me. Well, I got a lump in my throat really whenever I tell that story. And especially when I think of the fact that Marty lives down the street on West Wesley.
So, what was your reaction to that? Why the lump in your throat?
I'm sorry?
Why the lump in your throat?
Well, when I think of a story of somebody as great as that, whom you might say